Hi all, and welcome back to part 2 of our ongoing tutorial series on making your own simple 3D space shooter. And this week we're going to tackle low poly 3D modeling. So at the end of this tutorial you'll be able to navigate your way around Blender and do some simple 3D modeling, including simple texturing and UV unwrapping. Just as a disclaimer, while I am an expert programmer and I guess Unity user, I don't claim to be an expert in Blender. I just kind of know enough to get by, and I'm certainly not an artist, 3D or otherwise. So all you're going to learn here is just how to get around Blender and how to do some very basic 3D modeling techniques. If you end up enjoying this and this stuff interests you, I recommend looking up tutorials by far smarter people than me in this area and following those along. There's a guy on YouTube called Grant Abbott, I believe, who's just a fantastic Blender tutorial creator. And I think just 3D modeling concepts in general. So this is just going to be an introduction for you and enough to create assets that we can use in our little game. All right, so let's get started. So I'm going to go to File, New, General. This is what a new scene looks like in Blender. Let's talk about how to move the camera around. Just to start out with, if I click and drag the middle mouse button around, I can orbit my camera around like so. If I scroll the mouse wheel up and down, I can zoom in and out. And if I hold down Shift and then drag the middle mouse, I can pan my camera around. So that's all you need to know about moving your camera around. I'll add to that. If you hit the 1 key on your number pad, it's going to snap to a front view. If you hit the 3 key on the numpad, it's going to snap to a side view. And we'll use that in a second here. Okay, so like I said, when you start a new scene, this is what you get presented with. You get a little cube and a camera and a light. We want to only deal with the cube because we're not going to actually render these out. We're just going to use the mesh. So I'm going to click on the camera over here in the scene collection. This is a lot like the Unity hierarchy. So I'm going to click to select the camera, and I can see it's highlighted over here. And then I'm going to hit the delete key to delete it. And then I'm going to do the same with the light. I'm going to select it, see that it's highlighted over here, and then hit the delete key. Next, we're going to save our model. So I'm going to hit File, go to Save As, and you want to find your project folder that we set up, your Unity project folder. In my case, my Unity project is called Simple Space Shooter. And then there's an Assets folder. Inside your Assets folder, we previously set up the folders for models, scenes, scripts, and sounds. We're going to go into the Models folder. And then I want you to set up 3 folders in here. One for the player, one for a bad guy. I'm calling a generic bad guy the baddy. And then one for the boss. I'm calling the boss a big bad in my case. So first click into that player folder that I just had you set up. And now you want to name your file, whatever it is you're going to name it. I'm going to call it player2.blend because I've already created these models, and I'm going to do another one here for the tutorial for you. And then click Save As. So now the file's saved, and we're all ready to start editing. So I want to note that up here in the upper left part of this window, you can see where it says Object Mode. If you click on that, you'll have a number of different options depending on what you have selected, but we want to make sure we're in object mode, so keep it in object mode for now. All right, so I've selected the cube now. I'm in object mode, like I just said, and now over here on the right we have this set of icons, and these are different properties we can modify. So I'm going to click on this wrench here. It's called Modifier Properties. And then over here there's a drop down that says add modifier. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to select mirror from the drop down, and this will add a mirror modifier to our cube that we have. I'm going to keep all these options as they are. I want the x-axis to be mirrored, and I'm going to select clipping so that's checked. There's a check mark there. And now we're ready to start editing our cube. So with our cube selected still, we're going to go over to where it says object mode. I'm going to click on that and then hit edit mode in the dropdown. So now we can see that our cube is ready to be edited. Just to the left of where it says edit mode, I want you to just note those first three buttons. The first button has a little dot there. So that lets you select the vertices of the 3D model that you're editing. So the vertices would be these little points in space. The second icon lets you select edges. So edges are the lines that connect the vertices to each other. And then finally, the last icon there is face select. So that lets you select the entire polygons. We call these faces. I am going to turn on X-ray. So over here on the right, there's a button here that says toggle X-ray. I'm going to make sure that's on so now we can see through our cube. And I'm going to start by going to vertex select mode. And I'm going to press B to do a box select. And I'm going to drag it over so that I've selected all of these vertices on the left side of the cube. We want to make sure, if we hit the 1 key on the nub pad so that we snap to the front view, we want to make sure we're getting all the vertices on the left here. Then I'm going to press G. G lets you move things around. And then I'm going to hit X so that I'm only moving on the X-axis. And then I want to move it over so that as far as I possibly can to the right. So what this is going to do is snap these vertices to the very middle of our cube. And if you find that it's not snapping to the cube, that it's doing this, it's going past it, make sure your clipping option is checked over here in the mirror modifier. That's what's going to do that snapping for you. Okay, so now that we have our vertices in the middle there. So just to show you what the mirror modifier is doing, I'm going to select this one vertice here. So everything that happens on essentially the right side as I'm looking at the model here, everything that happens on this side of the cube is going to be repeated over on this side, on the left side of the cube. So just like that. Okay. So let me show you some very basic, very rudimentary low poly modeling techniques. Now, typically when you're low poly modeling, or really any kind of modeling, you're going to want to draw out the shape that you want first. Like a flat drawing from like the side perspective, and better yet, also from the front perspective. And then you would import those images into Blender, and you would tailor the extrusions that you're going to make to fit in with the drawing that you did. In this case, I haven't made a drawing. This is going to be a pretty basic spaceship. So we're just going to kind of eyeball it. I'm going to start by clicking on the very front of our spaceship, and I'm going for like a fighter pilot sort of looking spaceship. So I'm going to select the front, and I'm going to start making the nose of the spaceship. So with this front face selected, and again, to select faces, I came up here to select mode and made sure it's this third icon for selecting faces. And then just left click on the face you want to select. With that face selected, I'm going to hit E to extrude. And here we've made our extrusion. Now I'm going to hit S to scale and Z to scale on the Z axis to sort of taper that extrusion in. And actually, I'm going to Control Z that. I'm going to undo that. I think what I want to do is I want to leave this bottom flat. So instead of hitting S to scale, I'm going to go to vertex edit mode, or vertex select mode, I should say, and just select these two top vertices. You can either do a box select like we did earlier by pressing B, or you can left click on one vertice and hold down Shift and click on the next vertice so that I have these two top vertices selected. Now I'm going to hit G for moving the vertices around, and then hit Z to lock it to the Z-axis and just kind of bring it down a little bit and taper that down. Back into face edit mode, or face select mode. I keep saying edit mode. I'm going to do another extrusion. So I've selected my face, and then I'm going to hit E and extrude the face out. And once again, I'm going to go back to vertex select mode, select these two top vertices, hit G to move them around, and then Z to lock it to the Z-axis. Now I'm going to go back to face select mode, select that front face, and we'll do the nose now. E to extrude, and then once more, select the top two vertices out front, hit G to move them, and then Z to lock it to the Z-axis, and move those down. So now we have a little curve here representing the front of the spaceship. Might elongate this. No, I'm just gonna keep it as is. I think we're good here. Okay, turning our attention towards the back of the spaceship, I'm gonna select this backmost face, and then hit E to extrude, and I'm just gonna do a little extrusion here. Now I'm gonna select the side of this new face that was created. So it's this little slit here, and I'm gonna hit E to extrude, bring this out to make our wings. While that's still selected, I'm going to hit S to scale and Z to scale up and down. And I'm just going to scale that in a touch. Now I'm going to hit G to move, and then Z to move up and down, and then try to kind of make this bottom flat. So now we have wings that come out of the side. Maybe I'll bring those out a little bit too by hitting G and then X to move on the X-axis to make a little longer wings. So now at the top, I'm going to select this top little face here. I'm going to hit E to extrude and bring it up a touch. Now I'm going to scale by hitting S and then X to scale on the X-axis and make a sort of pointy tail of sorts. No, I think I'll just keep that kind of straight up. So we'll finish this by selecting this back face, and we'll make a little engine booster back here. So the face is selected. I'm going to hit E to extrude, bring it out a touch. Then I'm going to hit S and just extrude scale the entire thing down just a touch, which sometimes gets a little sensitive. All right. And then extrude again, scale it down a little more. And how would it look like if I kind of made that inwards? I think that looks kind of cool. So last thing I did here, after I extruded there, I hit G to move, and then Y to move on the Y-axis, and then I just brought it in. So that we have this little enclosure. And I think looks kind of neat. Then again, I don't know. I don't know if I like that. I'm going to take that back. I'll just bring it down again. Maybe extrude one more time. Okay, yeah, extrude one more time to get a little rocket booster coming out of the back. Okay, so let's embellish this just a touch. And obviously, the more you work on yours, the better it's going to look. We're just going to do some quick and dirty modifications here. So I'm going to select all these top faces, like so. So you notice I've turned off X-ray mode because I don't want to accidentally select anything down here. I just want these top faces. And I'm going to hit the F3 key. The F3 key is going to bring up this search box. I'm going to type in sub, and I want to subdivide. What subdivide is going to do is it's going to take the faces you selected and subdivide them into more faces. So now, as you can see, I have 4 faces for every individual face that I had before. That's a quick way to add sort of more detail to your models. I'm going to hit the edge select and then select all these top edges. And actually down here, I think I'm going to add an edge here as well. So to do that, I'm going to hit K to bring out this little knife cut tool. I'm going to click on this vertex here, and then you can see this little line that's going to follow me around. I'm going to go to the bottom edge and click, left click, and then hit enter. And now I have an edge here. Okay, back in edge select. Actually, I'm going to stay in edge select, and I'm going to select this new edge that I have here, this new line that goes up the entire front and top side of the model. And once that's all selected, I am going to press G and X to move it over. Now I'm going to go to face select. And select all of these new faces. And just extrude them up just a touch. And select this front nose and just extrude it on the Y, just a touch. So I'm just adding some shape to our model. Finally, I'm going to select these side faces here. And we're going to add a little curve to the side of our spaceship. So I'm going to select all these, hit E to extrude just a touch, and then S to scale down. So now we have a little roundness to our spaceship. As always, save early, save often. So Control S at any time will save your work. So remember to do that. Once you're happy with how your spaceship looks, you can proceed on to the next step, which is going to be adding a basic texture to your spaceship. So you can pause it here if you want to continue working on yours. Otherwise, we'll continue on here. So in order to add a texture to our spaceship, I'm going to bring my mouse over to the edge of the screen here so that I can adjust this window size. I'm going to right click over there, and I'm going to get this area options pop up. I'm going to hit vertical split and then choose where to split the window. I'm going to split it down the middle. So now I have two views inside my Blender. On the left view, I'm going to come up to where it says, to the left of where it says edit mode, there's this icon here for different kind of viewports and I guess like workspaces. I don't know what you might call that. And I'm going to go to UV editor. So this view is now in the UV editor view. And then over here we're in the edit mode view. At any time in the edit mode or really anywhere within Blender, if you hit the A key, you're going to select all of the whatever's in there. In this case, I'm in the edit mode, so if I hit A, it's going to select all of the faces of my model. So now we're going to UV unwrap. Okay, so let's talk about UV unwrapping first. So what is UV unwrapping? So in order to paint our model and provide it with a texture, we need to do what is called UV unwrapping. And you can think of UV unwrapping as taking your 3D model and sort of flattening it out to something 2D that we can paint on. There's a lot of techniques for UV unwrapping. It's a science all of its own. I'm not going to get into too much of that here. You can explore that on your own in other YouTube tutorials if you want. But for our little simple purposes here, I'm going to show you one technique within Blender, which is automatic UV projecting. So with all my faces selected, again by pressing the A button or the A key on my keyboard, I'm now going to press the U key, and that's going to bring up the UV mapping little pop-up here, and I'm going to hit Smart UV Project. And I would typically play around with these fields to and unwrap it over and over again to kind of see what works the best. In this case, I'm just going to leave all the options as they are. And as you can see over here in our UV editing window here, it has basically turned our 3D model into a 2D model, all the little 2D shapes that go into our 3D model. This is not a perfect unwrap by going about doing things this way, but it was obviously very quick and easy for us. Again, if you want to learn more about that, you can. Okay, so now that we're unwrapped, we can start texturing our model. So I'm going to come up here where it says edit mode. I'm going to click on that and go to texture paint. Over here on the right, where we have all these icons, before, as you recall, we clicked on the wrench to add the mirror modifier. Now we're going to click on the icon that looks like a screwdriver and a wrench side by side. In this set of options we have here, I'm going to go here where it says no textures. I'm going to hit the plus button, and then I'm going to select base color. We can set the width and height of our texture. I'm going to leave those at 1024. Obviously the higher pixel count, you want it as a power of 8, by the way. So, but you can increase that or decrease it. The higher pixel count, the more allows you to be more detailed. Obviously higher resolutions are more detailed, but for what we're doing here, it's going to be 1024 is just fine. If anything, we might even be useful to bring that down, because we're just going to do a very basic paint job here. All right, so I'm going to hit OK. In my texture painting window here, let's just go through some of the tools. So first of all, you have this. I can select the color that I want by clicking on this white box here. It's going to show me what color I currently have selected as my paintbrush. I'm going to go with like a dark gray base coat. Over here where it says radius, I can increase or decrease how big the circle of paint is. So I'm going to go with like somewhere around 100 for now for this base coat, and then strength. So you can do blending. You know, I can have one, I could put on my base coat and then I can blend in another coat by taking the like a different color and bringing the strength down. But I'm going to keep that at 1 for now. Okay, so I'm going to paint by holding down left click and just painting over all the areas that I want painted. So I'll go ahead and do that. All right, now that everything's this kind of dark gray, I'm going to maybe paint this stripe here blue. So I'll go for like a dark blue, maybe lighten that up just a touch. Then I'm going to bring the radius down and paint this stripe up the front. So you notice the mirror modifier is applying to the paint job as well. I think paint a stripe up the center here. And maybe I'll make the very tips of these tail and wing a solid blue color. So you see this stripe of blue here? This is because we use this smart UV project, and UVs aren't perfect, so we're having some bleed over from different areas. But again, for what we're doing right here, it's fine. I'm not too worried about it. Let's get the tip of the wing as well. We'll make blue. And then maybe finally we'll paint the boosters something like a bright yellow. Something like that. Okay, so you can go ahead and add any kind of details or paint whatever it is you want on your model. I'm going to leave it there. Over here on the UV side, I want to go to this this little picture icon, drop down, and select material base color. So this is going to show me, you see how I have the UVs here, and it's showing me what that actual 2D texture looks like. And like I said, if you did a more manual UV editing process, you probably, you know, for a really nice texture, you're going to do a lot of the work in the texture itself, not necessarily painting it on the model. This is just kind of a quick and dirty thing we're doing here. I just want to give you the basic idea of how to use these tools. Okay, so over here in the UV editing port, I'm going to click on the image drop down here. I'm going to select Save As. And I want to create a texture. I'm going to call it like player text, you can call it, or really call it whatever you want, then hit Save As Image. And that's going to save our texture that we've made here. Again, while Control S is going to save the entire model. I'll save this at player's text 2. Okay. So once our model is finished, and we want to export it, let's see how that's done. So we're going to come over to the File dropdown. I'm going to go Export and FBX. So FBX is a model format that Unity knows how to read. I'm going to select Mesh over here on Object Types because we just want the geometry to come over, and then give a name to our model. And then hit Export when we're done. Okay, so that's really everything from start to finish of creating a model in Blender and exporting it to Unity. Before we go to Unity and I show you how to then import it for use within Unity, I just want to briefly go over what the other models look like. So you can download these models by going to the GitHub repository that I've linked in the description of this video. But if you want, you can use the techniques we went over here to create your own 3D models for the enemy ships. So here's the common, or smaller enemy type that I created. So it has a little more of an alien shape to it, a little more jagged looks to it. But these are the exact same techniques. I applied a mirror modifier and I just extruded shapes out of the central cube to create an enemy. And then for our boss looking bad guy, I started from a geosphere. Make sure I'm saying that right. It is an icosphere. So that was the sphere, and then I extruded some of the individual triangles out to create this boss-looking bad guy here. And then I did the same export process to export those into the FBX file format. So again, if you just want to download these, or like I say, I encourage you to make your own models. Or if you're not interested in making models at all, go ahead and look in the Unity Asset Store. There's plenty of free models that you can grab to use if you'd rather do that. Okay, so let's get to covering how to import these on the Unity side. Go ahead and open your project in Unity and I'll meet back up with you once that's done. Okay, within Unity, now we're going to talk about how to import these models in. So at the top level of my Unity project is that Assets folder. I'm going to click on the Models folder, then in our Player folder, and we'll start with importing our player model. So it's as easy as just clicking here and dragging it in. I'm just going to normalize this by setting all the values to so that it's at position 0, 0, 0, rotation 0, 0, 0, and scale 1, 1, 1. And one thing I want to do here, whenever I import a new model, is I want to normalize the scale of the model. So let's go over here to Game Object, go to 3D Object and Cube. So this placed a cube in the world. I'm going to set that cube to be at 0, 0, 0 by setting the position there. Okay, so now we have a cube at 0, 0, 0. And a cube is, each side of the cube is 1 meter. So a cube is 1 meter cubed. And we want our spaceship to kind of make sense spatially. So I don't know how big an average jet fighter is, but let's say a jet fighter is, I don't know, what makes sense? Maybe 6 meters from tip to tail. Okay, so I've checked, and an F-15 fighter is 13 meters across. So I'm going to set this z-axis to 13 on our cube. And this is about how long we want our player model to be. So to mess around with the scale here, we're just going to change the scale factor on our FBX. So when I click on the FBX, I get these import options. I'm going to play around with the scale factor until I'm going to have this go. I'm going to rotate it on the X a bit so that it's facing the same way as the cube that we have. I'm going to go to my FBX and these import options and change the scale around until we get to approximately where that cube is. And that's too big. Let's try like 125. That's pretty close. Let's do 150. Okay, that's pretty much dead on. So now I feel like the scale of this model makes sense. And that's good. But one thing to note, if we have our rotation set to 0, 0, 0, you can see here the model is pointed down. In Unity, the way the axis work is the z-axis you can consider in and out, like forward or backwards. The x-axis we want to be left or right, and then the y-axis is always going to be up or down. So as you can see here, the y-axis for our model is actually forward, and we want the z-axis to be forward. So we can change that in Blender. We can rotate the model around and then re-export it so that it's facing the correct direction. But another thing we can do is just reparent it in Unity. So that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to go to Game Object, Create Empty. So this is created an empty game object here. I'm going to put it at 0, 0, 0. I'm going to name this game object player parent. And then I'm going to parent this player model to that player parent game object by dragging it underneath. So you see how here in the hierarchy view, we have at a top level of the hierarchy, we have this player parent, which is my empty game object. And then underneath that is the player object. And you see how it's kind of nested there. And I can click on this little triangle to show or hide all the children game objects. Okay, so now that that's parented, now I can rotate this player model game object 270 degrees on the x-axis so that its nose is facing forward on the z-axis, which is what we want, right? So now when it comes time to add code to make this player object move around and such, what we're going to be doing actually is adding the code to this top level player parent object. So that's what we're going to be moving around, because this top level player object is already oriented in the correct direction and everything is sort of normalized there. So that's one trick you can use. A lot of times you're going to import models from various sources, whether you buy them or you create your own, and these axes aren't going to mesh with what Unity's wants its axis to be. And that's a thing you're going to commonly do is do this reparenting like this. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control-S to save the scene. Our camera is right there looking at the back of the spaceship. We'll change that later. So that's really everything you need to know, from creating your model, starting out in Blender, to importing it into Unity. Next week, we're going to talk about having a scrolling space background. I was going to do that this week, but I decided to go with the 3D model instead. So we'll do that next week, and that'll be our first bit of code that we're going to be writing for this project. And we'll also talk about some programming best practices specifically around source control. So if you're enjoying these tutorials, please feel free to let me know. Let me know how the project's turning out for you. Leave a like if you feel so inclined. If not, that's okay too. Have a good day regardless. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to help you. And that'll do it. Thanks. I'll catch you next time.